Well, good evening, everybody, and I hope you are having a fabulous Saturday night. I came on tonight to do a little bit of an impromptu how to play of the game Santorini. And if you are not already familiar with the game Santorini, it is another game produced by the company Roxley Games Laboratory. It was created and designed by Gordon Hamilton, and it is a fantastic and fun abstract strategy game for 2 to 4 players. Although I will say, having played it at 2-player count and 3-player count, I would definitely recommend this game for 2 players more so than 3 or 4. But I haven't tried 4 players yet. Who knows? Might be really interesting. So in this game, you will have these little workers. Each player will have a set of 2, and you have a little replica of the island of Santorini that you will be using to move around and build on. And you can see it's got a 5x5 grid that you're going to be placing your workers on. So when you start out the game, you're going to be taking your 2 workers and you're going to be deciding where on the board that you want to place them, and then the other player will in turn place their 2 workers on any 2 spaces they want to place them. Now, what we're going to start out with describing is the basic rules of the game. There are these really awesome God Power cards. Let me show you a few there. There's Demeter, and who else do we have here? Chaos. And we've got Triton. Sorry, my thumb's in the way there. Those are going to really enhance the game and add to the complexity and the strategies of the game and make it more replayable. But for right now, I want to start with just how to play the basic game, and then we'll talk about how those God powers kind of come in to make the game even more interesting. So I've already placed my workers. What you're going to do on each turn is very simple. You're just going to, you're going to move one of your 2 workers, and then with that same worker that you chose to move, you are going to build. So let's look at the move action first. So when you're moving your worker, you can move them to any adjacent space surrounding them, as long as there's not another worker there, or you're not jumping off the island and going into the ocean. And then once you move, you're going to be able to build, and building involves taking one of these fabulous building pieces, of which there are 4 stories, and you're just going to place that building piece, the appropriate building piece, in one of the free spaces surrounding the worker you move. So I could then, let's say I build this piece here. Now, if there was already a place, a building piece where I was wanting to build, I would be able to add to it. So for example, if that piece was already there, I could add a second story to it. Or if there was already 2 stories there, I could add a third one. Or if there was already 3 there, I could go ahead and put a dome on it and make this pretty tower here. Oh, as I tear down the tower. Now also, it's important that I kind of go back to the movement thing, because there are some restrictions to movement based on buildings. Your worker can always move up at least 1 level, but he can't move up any more than 1 at a time. But he can safely even jump down from a 3rd-story tower and jump down to the bottom, and he's fine, no problems whatsoever. So now that you've kind of seen that you move a worker and then you build with that worker, the next thing I want to talk about is, well, what's the point of all this? Why are we moving around and why are we building things? In fact, probably should have said at the very beginning of the game what the object of this game is. The object of the game is to get one of your 2 workers on top of a third-story tower. Now that in itself seems super simple, but it's really not, because your opponent is going to be working against you to try to block you and build around you. Obviously, if my opponent was able to, let's set up a scenario here. Let's say I was about ready to win here, and I was on the second story, and my next move, I'm going to move to victory to the third story of the tower. Well, my opponent can counter move and counter build, so she could move here, and then she could build right here, and now I can no longer move up to the dome because it's blocked off, or up to the top of that tower because it's blocked off. So this game goes back and forth with people moving and building until either, like I said, one person is able to manage to move to the top of a third-story tower, or if you are unable to both move and build with one of your workers on your turn, your opponent automatically wins. So there are situations where you can work it out where you can trap your opponent's workers to where they can't both move and build on their turn, and then that will cause them to lose. So that's a general overview of how the game of Santorini works. And like I said, I've kind of done this in an impromptu fashion, so I hope that even not being very well prepared, that I still gave you a general idea of how the game is played. But I also promised you that I'd talk about the god powers. So once you've played the game a few times, just regular, with no god powers, you can take out this stack of glorious god powers that is comprised of characters from Greek mythology. We say god powers, but some of them are gods, some of them are monsters, some of them are heroes, and all of them allow you to break the game in a certain way. There's Medusa, which really makes the game a little bit more interesting, because then you're trying to figure out, it's a promo, by the way, that I was able to get. Then you're trying to figure out how to best play your power, especially when you take it into consideration against the particular opponent god power that you're playing. So every game with a different set of god powers that you and your opponent have becomes a completely different matchup. And then you have to try and figure out, okay, now how do I win with this particular god versus another? So here's one of the more easy to understand gods. This is Artemis. And Artemis's power is that instead of just moving once on her turn, she has the option to move 2 spaces with her moving worker. So that presents some interesting scenarios. And then let's see if I can find another one. Here's one I enjoy quite a bit, really good for trapping your opponent, is Atlas. And Atlas, instead of just being restricted to building a dome on the top level of a tower, Atlas can build a dome wherever he pleases, on the ground level, on the first level, doesn't matter. So that makes things interesting. Let me see if I can find one more. I did mention Medusa. She's one of the more advanced god powers once you get used to the basic ones. And Medusa, oh, I hate playing against Medusa. If when at the end of her turn, if one of her workers is higher than one of her opponent's workers, she basically turns them into a building block. So she turns you into stone, and then you lose that worker. And there's a couple god powers in here that will cause your opponent to have your workers taken out of the game, and that is very frustrating playing against one of those. So that's just a few examples of the different god powers that are in the game. Now, I will tell you, I have not only the base game here of Santorini, but I also purchased the expansion for it called the Golden Fleece, which gave me a whole bunch more gods and heroes to work with. And then you might have heard me mentioning earlier that I got the some promo gods for the game too. So I have this huge stack of gods and heroes to work with. So I don't think I will. Here's a stack that I've got. I don't think I will ever get bored with this game with that many possible combinations. I don't even know mathematically how many possible combinations there might be with that setup. But anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Santorini is definitely available at most of your local game shops. If they don't have it, they can probably order it, or you might be able to pick it up on Amazon or some other online board game store. And Paul, thank you. Paul reminded me, if you do pick up the Golden Fleece expansion, it has basically a very small package, and it doesn't actually have the instructions for the gods that are included, but you can go on to Roxley's website, and then you can actually pull that Santorini rulebook up there, and it will give you those other god powers. And the Golden Fleece is a completely other thing too. It's a game variant that we won't really go into tonight. And Paul has told me there are over 2,500 possible matchups if you have the expansion and the promos, not including the heroes. That is crazy. So that is a great amount of replayability that you will get with this game. And I believe that they are still testing new god powers as we speak. I've seen that being discussed. So there are more gods to come, so that number of matchups will increase even more so, which is really exciting. So anyways, I will now end this video, but thank you to everybody for attending. And Paul, thank you for coming on and kind of helping me out there a little bit. I appreciate it. And I hope everybody has a wonderful Saturday evening. Thank you so much.